Just 3 Israeli helicopters slicing through the early morning haze over the Sinai Peninsula, their rotors humming low against the desert wind. Inside, 15 of Israel's top IDF commanders were en route to a covert rendezvous point, part of a classified operation that had been months in the making. But Egypt had been watching, not just watching, anticipating. Their air defense systems, upgraded and recalibrated in recent months, had tracked the helicopters from the moment they crossed into Egyptian airspace. What happened next wasn't improvisation. It was execution. Within minutes, Egyptian radar locked onto the targets. A coordinated response was launched from 2 bases, one near El Arish, the other from a mobile unit station deep in the desert. The helicopters were intercepted with precision, forced to land in a controlled zone surrounded by Egyptian special forces. No shots fired. No casualties. Just 15 stunned commanders, now prisoners of a nation that had just rewritten the rules of engagement. The capture wasn't just a tactical win, it was symbolic. For decades, Egypt had played a balancing act in the region, often overshadowed by Israel's military dominance. But this operation sent a message. Egypt's intelligence and defense capabilities had evolved, and they had done so quietly, methodically, without the fanfare that often accompanies military upgrades. The world watched in disbelief. Israel scrambled for answers. And Egypt, for the first time in years, stood at the center of a geopolitical shift that no one saw coming. Inside Egypt's military command center, the mood was calm but electric. The operation had gone off without a hitch, and now the real work began. The 15 Israeli commanders were being held in a secure facility outside Cairo, guarded by elite units trained for high-value detentions. Egypt's intelligence officers moved swiftly, conducting interrogations with surgical precision. No leaks, no press, just quiet, calculated extraction of information. The goal wasn't humiliation, it was leverage. Back in Tel Aviv, the Israeli Defense Ministry was in crisis mode. The loss of 3 helicopters was bad enough, but the capture of 15 senior commanders? Unprecedented. These weren't field officers, they were strategic minds, architects of regional operations, some with direct ties to Mossad and Shin Bet. Israel's prime minister convened an emergency session, demanding answers. How had Egypt anticipated the flight path? How had they executed the capture without a single misstep? Theories swirled. Had Egypt infiltrated Israeli communications? Was there a mole inside the IDF? Or had Egypt's surveillance capabilities simply outpaced expectations? Whatever the answer, one thing was clear. Israel had underestimated Egypt. And now, the balance of power in the region was shifting. International reaction was swift but cautious. The United States issued a statement urging restraint, while Russia praised Egypt's defensive sovereignty. Arab nations, long skeptical of Egypt's military posture, suddenly saw a new player rising. Egypt wasn't just defending its borders, it was asserting its intelligence dominance. And yet, Cairo remained silent. No press conference. No parade. Just a quiet message sent through diplomatic channels. We are not seeking war. We are protecting our sovereignty. But behind closed doors, Egypt's leadership knew this was more than a defensive maneuver. It was a strategic awakening. Inside Israel's military hierarchy, the fallout was immediate. Trust fractured. Fingers pointed. Some believed the operation had been compromised from within, others blamed overconfidence in aerial stealth. The captured commanders were not just military assets. They were symbols of Israel's strategic reach. Their absence left a vacuum, and that vacuum bred uncertainty. Operational plans were frozen. Border patrols intensified. And behind closed doors, contingency scenarios were drawn up, none of them ideal. Meanwhile, Egypt's leadership convened in a high-security briefing room beneath the Ministry of Defense. The mood was sober. They understood the gravity of their actions. Capturing enemy commanders was not a routine maneuver, it was a geopolitical statement. But Egypt wasn't seeking escalation. The goal was leverage, not war. Intelligence analysts reviewed the data extracted from the helicopters, encrypted devices, mission logs, tactical maps. What they found confirmed their suspicions. Israel had been conducting covert surveillance deep inside Egyptian territory. This revelation changed everything. Egypt now had proof not just of airspace violation but of strategic intent. The evidence was quietly shared with key allies, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The message was clear. Egypt was no longer a passive actor. It was a regional power with the capability to detect, intercept, and respond. Inside the captured helicopters, Egyptian technicians worked methodically. Every wire, every chip, every encrypted file was cataloged. The goal wasn't just to understand Israel's technology, it was to reverse engineer it. Egypt's defense sector, long reliant on foreign imports, saw an opportunity to leap forward. And in the shadows of this operation, a new doctrine was being written, one that prioritized intelligence, precision, and strategic restraint. In diplomatic circles, the silence was deafening. Egypt's foreign ministry received a flurry of back-channel messages, some urging de-escalation, others probing for details. Israel's allies, particularly the United States, pressed for clarity, but Egypt held firm. The message remained consistent. The helicopters violated sovereign airspace, and the response was lawful. No apologies, no concessions, just facts. Inside Israel, the psychological impact was spreading. Military families demanded answers. Media outlets speculated wildly, some suggesting the commanders were baited into a trap. Others questioned whether Egypt had received external intelligence support. The narrative fractured. What had once been a confident, unified front now showed cracks. And in those cracks, Egypt saw opportunity. Cairo began quiet diplomatic outreach, not to boast, but to recalibrate its position in the region. Meetings were held with Gulf leaders, African allies, and European envoys. The tone was measured, but the subtext was clear. Egypt was no longer a reactive power. It was proactive, precise, and capable of defending its interests without chaos. Meanwhile, the captured commanders were being treated according to international protocols. No mistreatment, no propaganda. Egypt understood the optics. This wasn't about revenge, it was about control. And control in geopolitics is everything. In Tel Aviv, military strategists revised their assumptions. Egypt's radar coverage, previously thought to be patchy, was now considered formidable. Its response time, once dismissed as sluggish, had proven lightning fast. And its intelligence network, long underestimated, had clearly matured. The region held its breath. Would Israel retaliate? Would Egypt release the commanders? Or had a new cold calculus taken hold, one where power was measured not in firepower, but in precision and restraint? For now, Egypt had the upper hand, and the world, watching closely, began to reconsider the balance of influence in the Middle East. Weeks passed, and the world waited. Egypt maintained its silence, refusing to be baited into theatrics. Behind the scenes, negotiations began. Quiet, tense, and layered with strategic nuance. Israel wanted its commanders back. Egypt wanted recognition, respect, and a recalibration of regional dynamics. The exchange wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't just about personnel, it was about precedent. In Geneva, intermediaries from neutral nations facilitated dialogue. Egypt presented its evidence. Flight paths, intercepted communications, and surveillance data. Israel, cornered but calculating, acknowledged the breach without admitting intent. The commanders, still held under strict security, became symbols of a larger truth, one that neither side could ignore. The Middle East was changing, and Egypt had proven it could shape that change. Eventually, a deal was struck. The commanders would be returned, but not without conditions. Egypt demanded and received guarantees of non-aggression, intelligence-sharing protocols, and a formal acknowledgement of its airspace sovereignty. The exchange was discreet, held at a remote airstrip under heavy guard. No cameras, no speeches, just a quiet handover that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Back in Cairo, the mood was resolute. Egypt had not only defended its borders, it had redefined its role. The operation became a case study in strategic restraint, intelligence mastery, and geopolitical finesse. Military academies across the region began revising their curricula. Analysts rewrote their models, and Egypt, once seen as a reactive power, now stood as a force of calculated precision. In Tel Aviv, the lesson was clear. Assumptions had been shattered. The region's power map had been redrawn, and while the helicopters were gone, and the commanders returned, the psychological imprint of Egypt's operation remained. The desert had spoken, not with noise, but with clarity, and the world, listening closely, would not forget.